Welcome to the debate. Look at any corporate org chart, right? It's full of clean lines and, neat boxes.
Yeah, definitely.
But the human beings inside those boxes, they are messy, driven by ego, guided by secret intuitions.
And all the stuff we try to hide in the boardroom, really.
Exactly. So today, we're asking a pretty controversial question. Can the ancient text-based principles found in the 7 pillars of uncommon biblical leadership actually work in a modern, secular boardroom? I argue that the core tenets of this framework actually offer the ultimate blueprint for the modern servant leader.
Right, and I look at those exact same principles, and frankly, I see a recipe for disaster in a secular environment. My concern is that bringing this into a boardroom inadvertently builds an opaque top-down monarchy, one that actively bypasses modern corporate transparency.
Well, let's start with the foundation, because effective modern corporate leadership is frankly impossible without it. The framework demands intense self-knowledge, knowing your own weaknesses and your own changing needs before you even attempt to lead others.
Sure, self-knowledge is a great baseline.
Right. But when an executive pairs that deep self-awareness with a commitment to mentoring the people under them, you completely subvert the traditional corporate authority model. It isn't about, commanding from on high. It becomes true servant leadership. You just pour your hard-won experience into developing your team.
I mean, that sounds fantastic on paper. But when you examine the actual mechanics of how this plays out, it relies so heavily on isolated, localized authority. The text advises leaders to silently discern the unspoken agendas of their team, right? And to constantly listen to their inner whispers.
Which is a pretty valid leadership trait.
Is it, though? If you're listening to this and managing a team right now, you're probably thinking, if I make decisions purely on inner whispers, HR is going to have a field day with me. It encourages a CEO who governs by suspicion and secret intuition. It completely sidesteps the objective, data-driven governance that keeps executives accountable to a board.
I think you're confusing intuition with dodging accountability. Think about how we talk about top-tier executives today. We constantly praise founders' intuition, right? Or executive gut instinct.
Yeah, but
Wait, hear me out. When a leader walks into a boardroom and senses a hidden agenda right before a major merger, we don't call that suspicion. We call it high-level emotional intelligence. That inner whisper is really just the psychological software of a leader reading the room to maintain a healthy corporate hierarchy.
Okay, let's say I grant you the value of executive intuition. Where it breaks down for me is how this intuition shapes corporate rewards. The framework heavily emphasizes rewarding those who demonstrate honor and true trust toward the leader.
Which builds loyalty.
But in a secular business environment, when you substitute measurable metrics and objective KPIs for personal honor, you're not building a meritocracy. You're building an authoritarian culture. It stops being about who's the most competent and becomes entirely about fealty. And that is a dangerous game.
It would be dangerous, yeah, if it operated in a vacuum, but you're missing the framework's ultimate failsafe, which is the mandate to relentlessly ask the unexpected question. This is where the servant leader model actually proves itself.
How so?
Well, how does a CEO actually disrupt an echo chamber of yes men? By throwing a curveball. When an executive asks a question the team hasn't prepped for, it strips away the polished presentations. It forces vulnerability and demands truth. A leader who rigorously and humbly learns from those unexpected answers just can't be an authoritarian.
But look at the power dynamic there. Relentless questioning is a great tactic, yeah, but if the executive is the only one judging those answers based on a private intuition,
Right.
an intuition nobody else has access to, then the questioning is largely performative. The authority remains entirely top-down. The team is still just scrambling to guess what the boss's secret gut feeling is telling them today. It relies way too heavily on the flawless character of the person at the top.
That's a fair challenge. Though I maintain that the framework's relentless focus on being a lifelong learner, constantly refining yourself to better serve the organization, that safeguards against that kind of ego. The fundamental demand for rigorous self-knowledge built an incredibly durable, modern servant leader philosophy.
And I'll hold my ground that, relying on unspoken discernment and prioritizing personal honor over transparent metrics, well, it runs the risk of cultivating a top-down corporate structure if it goes unchecked. However, I think we do completely agree on your core premise. Personal self-knowledge is an absolute non-negotiable for anyone in a leadership position.
Exactly. Without that baseline self-awareness, any leadership framework, secular or otherwise, just collapses under the weight of executive ego. We invite you to reflect on how these ancient leadership concepts might translate to your own professional environment, leaving the final verdict entirely up to you.
Yep, perfectly said.
So, next time you step into the boardroom and look at that clean, engineered org chart, ask yourself, who is the complex human filling that box? And what inner whispers are truly guiding their hand?